Good morning and welcome to our Facebook Live audience. We are talking right now with Tanya Allen, president of Parents as First Educators in Canada. The topic this morning, a new law in Canada's largest province that allows the government to take children from their homes in cases where the parents disagree with the child's expressed gender identity. As you can imagine, a lot of interest in this. If you are watching, please feel free to let us know where you're watching from and if you have questions for Tanya. Tanya, thanks a lot for joining us this morning.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Heather.
Tanya, you were concerned about this bill from the start. You traveled up to 17 cities to drum up the opposition. How do you make sense of what happened here?
Well, we weren't surprised this bill passed or even that it was introduced because our current Premier of Ontario, that's our equivalent of our governor, if you will, she has been pursuing a very radical anti-family, very pro-sexual education agenda since she was first elected, even before when she was the Minister of Education. So this came as no surprise. However, you know, in a reality check, you're thinking, wow, the government's really going to infringe on my rights yet again as a parent and this much. So I wasn't surprised it passed because they do have the majority. But we definitely needed as parents to really speak up, find our voice and lobby against this.
You did have a small percentage of lawmakers who did vote against it. But where was the church in all of this?
Well, I mean, we did speak with some pastors and some local priests who were concerned. And, you know, I'd say in a quiet way, they did do what they could. However, sadly, you know, there wasn't really a response from the clergy as I would have expected or I would have liked. In Ontario, we do enjoy, there are certain things called children's aid societies, which are run by the Catholic Church. So I was hoping that they would be more vocal on this, considering this new law would govern how those Catholic children's aid societies are governed.
All right, I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there who are concerned about this new law. What does it allow the government to do that Christian parents should really be aware of?
So there are three main areas where we have been very concerned. So number one, the inclusion of gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation as terms in which stakeholders such as children's aid societies, teachers, judges, family services, when they're intervening what the best interests of the child are, they're now taking into consideration those three things. So that was one big concern, because, for example, if there's a family who has a child who says, Mom, you know, I mean, we've all had kids who say funny things sometimes, but sometimes a child will say, hey, Mom, you know, I think I'm actually a boy when this child's a girl. Well, if the parent doesn't immediately say seek surgical intervention or hormone therapy, the state could decide that, hey, you know what, those parents aren't seeking the best interests of the child, ergo, we need to intervene. So that's one area that we're very concerned. Another area is the removal of the phrase religious upbringing, the diminishment of the family's role in the upbringing of a child. So now, rather than when these agencies consider the best interests of the child, they used to consider the religious upbringing, if any, of that child. Now it's been changed to the creed of the child or the religion of the child. So the onus is placed solely on the child. What does the child believe, not what the family environment was? And the third area that we're very concerned with, and we have seen already some ramifications of this, is what I'd like to consider a litmus test for adoptive and foster parents. So when potential or prospective foster parents and adoptive parents are interviewed by children's aid societies and whatnot, they're being asked, what is your position on gender theory? Do you believe in gender identity? What would you do if you had a child like this? So we're seeing some very good Christian homes being blackmarked, and probably they won't have any more foster kids come their way because they've been targeted now by the children's aid societies.
All right, so let's break this apart a little bit. First, with respect to Christian parents who have a child who comes to them and says, hey, I'm thinking maybe I'm the opposite gender from what I really am. You're saying that if those parents don't allow that child to have a surgical intervention, that the state could intervene?
Yes, you could be seen as you could be seen as doing emotional or physical harm to your child, which is crazy because I would argue getting those surgical interventions and giving a child puberty blockers is actually harmful and definitely not in the best interest of the child. And all the research states this. So yeah, the state in that case, they could very well, I can't say they are for a fact going to, but they have it within their law now that they could go in and take your child away because you are not supporting the best interest of your child.
All right, and then let's go back to the foster care issue. I mean, I know in the U.S. there's a desperate need for foster care parents. And, you know, of course, we want Christian parents to be foster care parents. Do you think that this is really going to discourage Christians in Canada from becoming foster care parents?
I fully, I do. You know, my husband and I were chatting about would we become foster parents ourselves? And with this law, is there even a point to apply? Christians are clearly being discriminated against. Would we even jump through those hoops? How would we answer those questions? So yes, I do think that Christians and other people of reason and goodwill are definitely being discouraged and targeted against.
And are you hearing any feedback from this from the Christian aid societies, from those in Christian circles that do recruit foster care parents?
Yes, we have, like I said, heard from a handful of foster parents who feel they've now been targeted and they will be blacklisted and will not be given any other children. This is still kind of making its way. I mean, it was passed within 4 or 5 months. Well, actually, about 6 months. This thing was introduced and passed through all 3 readings. So it was pretty quick. I think people are still trying to digest the outcome and the effects this will have on society.
What happens next at this point? I mean, is there any hopes for defeating it, or you know, overturning it in another legislative session? What is your plan going forward?
Well, to be very clear, this bill was actually going to pass unanimously, but we had thousands upon thousands of parents lobby their members of parliament, and one member of parliament, provincial parliament, actually left his caucus. He was kicked out of the party because he wanted to speak out on issues like this. So it took one member of parliament to leave his party, vote against this, and for others to follow, like a parade almost. And so that was good news, is that we have finally broken the fortress that was going to, again, pass these kind of horrible legislations unanimously. So to have 23 MPPs vote against, it was a huge victory. But of course, we have this law. It's terrible. We need to get rid of the existing government. They're awful. And the current premier will stop at nothing to pursue her social agenda.
Now, of course, Ontario is Canada's largest province, so I'm sure, you know, what happens in Ontario, other provinces, the country is taking notice. Do you think other provinces might now pass this law, or do you think you might see something similar at the federal level?
At the federal level, we're currently there's currently a bill called Bill C-16, which is being passed through the Senate right now and being debated, which will codify gender expression and gender identity within the Human Rights Code, so that if someone speaks out against these things, it could be suggested that that's a hate crime. So we can see that this is slowly working its way federally and provincially. But yes, Ontario is the first to pass such legislation, and I definitely see this happening across the country, and frankly in the United States as well. Would it be surprising if California or Vermont passed legislation like this? Probably not.
Tanya, what is your advice for Christian parents in Ontario right now, thinking, wow, my child could literally go to the authorities or tell a school counselor and the government could take my child from me?
Well, number one is find your voice and speak up. Okay, the time to play the moderate card or the quiet Christian card is no longer. You're either on one side or you're on the other. That's the environment and the climate we're in right now. So you have to find your voice. You have to speak out. You have to equip your children. Teach your children your morals at home, pass them on, and help them to be strong within the school system, if they're in that system, to really know how to stand tall and speak out. Will you be targeted? Probably. But the consequence of not speaking out, as we can see, is far greater than if we stick our neck out. We're going to have to pick our poison sooner or later, and this is the time where we have still an opportunity to speak out and rally against things like this.
All right, Tanya Allen, I know there's a lot of interest here in the U.S., let alone in Canada, for what is going on. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to our Facebook Live audience for joining us. We'll continue to follow what's going on with this new law.
Thank you very much.